How well do you know Frank Gallagher from Shameless? Frank Gallagher, played by William H. Macy, is Shameless' most famous protagonist, or antagonist depending on how you feel about him. He's the father of the Gallagher children, but on more than one occasion, acts less mature than them. Frank cares about his children, but he's definitely not Father of the Year by a long shot. He drinks a lot, and is often shown to be in the attire of a homeless man. Even though he doesn't look like much, he's actually very intelligent, which is shown from time to time, even in his elaborate and illegal schemes. From the beginning of the show, we begin a love-hate relationship for Frank. He could probably be a great guy, if it weren't for him being such a terrible person. His logic for doing things doesn't always make sense to those around him, and to be truthful, his kids would probably be better off if he just left and never came back. But in all honesty, there'd be no Shameless if it weren't for Frank. Of all the Gallaghers, he is by far the most interesting. Because he plays such a major role in the show, there's a lot that we have learned about Frank Gallagher over the past 7 seasons, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we'll find out. We've come up with a quiz to see how much you've been paying attention to Frank and his antics. He probably doesn't even remember the answers to all these questions, but we hope you do. Q13. Which of Frank's children shot him? In Tell Me You Effing Need Me, Sammy turns on Frank after she realizes that he's just using her and her family and he doesn't care about anyone but himself. She's fed up and pulls a gun on him and tells him to get out of the house. Frank tells Sammy that she doesn't have the guts to shoot him, but she does and shoots him in the arm. To pour salt in his wounds, she literally pours salt in his wound until he tells her that he needs her to take care of him. Are we sure she isn't related to Monica? Q14. Who does Frank kill with his penis? Sheila begins to get over her fear of outside, so Frank dives into a new plan: get his ailing friend Dottie to fall in love with him and in return leave all her money to him when she dies. Frank goes over to Dottie's and spends more and more time with him. She reveals to Frank that she's leaving all of her money to her estranged daughter, but will give Frank money if he has sex with her. The reason this is a big deal is because if Dottie's heart rate gets too high, she dies. So essentially, she asks Frank to have sex with her so she can die. He does, she dies, he gets the money. Q15. Which organ was stolen from Frank in a botched surgery? After finding out about Frank's liver failing, Sheila, Joan Cusack, and Sammy, Emily Burkle, find a doctor that is willing to do a liver transplant for $25,000 with an extra $5,000 for the liver itself. They talk the doctor down to $26,000 total and he agrees to do the surgery. Doesn't seem shifty at all. The time comes for the surgery and the doctor tells them to call for help after they leave. They call for help and find out that Frank never got a liver transplant, but instead one of his kidneys had been stolen. Since he's in such bad condition now, he moves up the transplant list and gets a new liver sooner than expected. Q16. In Season 1, how much is Frank promised if he can stay sober for 2 weeks? He doesn't stay sober for 2 weeks. In an early episode of Season 1, Frank ends up in a hospital with a severe case of alcohol poisoning. The doctor tells him she's never seen such a bad case and tells him that if he can stay sober for 2 weeks, she'll give him $3,000 as a part of a study she's conducting. He agrees, of course. He tries to take his mind off of alcohol and runs into his daughter Debbie, who hypes him up with candy and soda. At home, everyone is happy that Frank's done drinking except for Lip, who has seen it all before. Lip and Fiona don't want the younger children to go through what they went through and get Frank drunk so he can't get the money. Back to regular life. Q17. Which of Frank's limbs is broken in an attempt to collect insurance money? Frank needs help trying to get her on purpose to collect insurance money for his liver, so he asks Carl for help. After several awful ideas, he gives up, but Carl doesn't take no for an answer. He drugs Frank and breaks his leg while he's asleep. He then wheels Frank to Sheila's house so he can collect the insurance money from the policy on her house. Like father, like son. Scammers unite. Q18. Who was Frank with the first time he ever did cocaine? In the last episode of Season 7, at Monica's funeral, Frank tells the story of how he met Monica. She was running from a man with a gun and jumped in the window of his car. He instantly fell in love with her and she taught him how to live. The first time he ever did a line of coke was with Monica. They loved a lot and fought a lot. She was the love of his life. Outside of the nun need-to-know details, this was actually pretty sad to watch. The one time I genuinely felt sorry for Frank. Q19. How does Frank lure Monica back into town so she can sign his settlement paperwork? Early in Season 1, Frank gets a call from his lawyer who tells him that one of his settlements came through, but in order to collect, he has to get Monica to sign the paperwork as well. Is this legal? Anywho, Frank gets Sheila to call Monica to tell her that she's won a teddy bear in a raffle. She's obsessed with teddy bears, and she has to come collect as soon as possible. Monica ends up at the store with her lesbian butch lover Bob and finds Frank instead of the teddy bear. How upsetting. Q20. How long was Frank gone from home when he woke up in Mexico? In the premiere episode of Season 3, Frank wakes up in Mexico with no money, no ID, and no passport. He tries to tell Border Patrol that he doesn't know how he got there and that he's a proud citizen, but that's a no-go. He meets a guy that tells him he can get him across the border, but when he and the other Mexicans try to run from customs, the plan is foiled. Back home, Debbie has started a memorial of how many days Frank has been gone, 137 days. He'll be back, says Fiona. He always is. Q21. What was the nickname given to Frank after he carried 18 balloons of drugs up his butt into the U.S.? Named after the title of the episode, Frank was affectionately given the name El Gran Cannon because the inside of his butt was so wide that he fit 18 little balloons of cocaine in it with no problem. Gross, I know. After receiving a new passport and a good cleanup, Frank walked back into the U.S. and met up with a pretty woman in a nice car that gave him the name. Little does she know, Frank actually smuggled 19 balloons of cocaine and kept one to himself. Q22. At the end of Season 3, Frank takes the fall for which of his children and ends up in jail? Trying to get some money, as almost always, Frank talks to Carl, Ethan Kutkoski, about how his temporary foster parents are filthy rich and have nice things all over the apartment, and how he still has the code to get into their place. So Frank and Carl go and steal a bunch of stuff and urinate on a few things. Later, the police show up and go straight to Carl because the code he used to get in was his name. Dio. Frank takes the fall, saying that he acted alone. Ian sees Frank being taken away and asks what happened. Lip tells him hell finally froze over. Q23. How long was Frank in a coma after the gang threw him into Lake Michigan? After Frank ruined Fiona's wedding by telling her that Sean was still using, Go Frank, by the way, his family and friends kidnap him and throw him into Lake Michigan. He wakes up after a month-long coma to a nurse giving him a sponge bath and humming Katy Perry. Not awkward at all. His doctor tells him that he was out for 30 days and Frank is sad that no one came to visit him. He goes to the alibi and Kev screams like he saw a ghost, because he was one of the people that threw Frank in the lake in the first place. Frank gathers his memory and leaves pissed. Q24. How many brothers does Frank have? It is revealed through Peggy Gallagher, Frank's mom, that Frank has 3 brothers, Wyatt, Clayton, and Jerry. Jerry looks surprisingly exactly like Frank, so we're going to assume that's his twin brother. We never meet Wyatt, but we do meet Clayton, who is assumed to be Ian's biological father. The freckles and red hair make us come to this conclusion, but we could be wrong. Probably not. Q25. What does Frank blame for having to get injured to pay for his liver surgery? While Frank and Carl were trying to find ways for Frank to get injured, Frank gets upset and says F King Obamacare. What kind of a system we live in where you have to cripple yourself to stay alive? That's just one of Frank's many different political views. I'm sure he has plenty more where that came from, and he isn't afraid to speak his mind to anyone. He also will talk to anyone listening, so he sure has a lot to say.